A bear is never worth more than 2 Sur runes. A jaw is never worth more than 2 bear runes. A jaw is probably worth the same amount as a bear rune. Maybe jaw add for a bear because of the utility of the runes. Welcome to a brief guide on rune prices, rune values. I just want to keep it a little bit short. I might in the future make a longer video on how you value items in general. But valuation in general is about, and I work as financial economist, have done company valuation, M&A, do quant analysis and so on, so I would know something about pricing and value. So there are sort of 4 things that affect the value of any item in Diablo, and this applies to runes as well. Number 1 is rarity. Number 2 is utility. Number 3 is liquidity. Number 4 is personal value. So the 4 valuation variables: rarity, utility, liquidity, personal value. So rarity, obviously, a Zod rune is more rare than an Ist. Yesterday for me, 2 Ist runes dropped. I have never seen a Zod rune drop in my 20 years of Diablo 2. Never. Chum is the highest rune I've ever seen drop. I've never seen a Jaw rune drop also. I've seen all of the runes drop. So rarity, obviously, and you have to understand the rune hierarchy. This is extremely important. When you value runes, always keep the rune hierarchy in mind, that you can merge 2 Ists and get a ghoul. You can merge 2 ghouls and get a Vex. So the price here is never above this, and this rune hierarchy is based on probability of drop, because the lower down you go, the less likely it is to drop. So low is more rare than Orm. Sur is more rare than Law. Bear is more rare than Sur. Jah is more rare than Bear. That brings us to utility. That's the number 2. So since Jah is more rare than Bear, therefore Jah is more expensive than Bear? No. Since Chum is more rare than Jah and Bear, Chum must be more expensive? No. Zod? No. Even if they are much more rare. Particularly Zod is significantly much more rare than these runes. It's because of number 2, utility, how useful it is. And in this list, the most useful runes would be Orm, Lo, Ber, Jah, and Ist, and maybe Vex. I'll keep out the Orm. Orm, Ist, Vex are also useful because you use Ist in like Call to Arms, Vex in Heart of the Oak, such as what I have here, right? It's the Heart of the Oak, Kovex Pool Soul. But anyway, going back to this, Law is very useful because it's used in best in slot 2 items. Fortitude, armor, is best in slot armor for some melee classes, also for your merc. So ethereal, 4-socketed, elite armor, you put El Soldolo. It's also used for best in slot weapon. Grief for melee, like Zealadins, Smitadins, some barbarians, etc. So Law is therefore extremely useful. Therefore it has a higher value than its rarity. Even if it's less rare than Sur, it's more valuable than Sur relatively to its position in the rune hierarchy. I mean, you are not going to trade a Sur for a Law. Those trades happen. There are people who have a Sur and they want a Law badly, so they are giving a Sur for a Law. But generally you would trade a Sur for a Law and an ad. Maybe not Law Orm, but maybe Law Ist. Something like that. Law Gul, maybe Law X. It depends a little bit. Well, anyway, this is the rarity, right? And the utility. Bear is the most valuable rune in the game. I put it as like 325 a high rune, and say that a high rune is like Orm is 1.0 a high rune. 3.25, it's the highest, is higher than Jais because Bear is used in 2 game-changing items. The first is Enigma, must have for Hammerdin, must have for like some other classes like Poison, Necro, and just so many classes. Enigma is a must-have, and Bear. Both Bear and Jah are runes used in Enigma. But Bear is also used in Infinity. In Infinity rune word, right? And not only does, this is close to a perfect Infinity, by the way, minus 54 plus 322. I was lucky yesterday on the roll. Not only is Infinity a completely game-changing item, it's must-have for Lightning Source, must-have for some other classes like Poison Necro. I think Javazon also uses Infinity and Fire Source and so many others. Not only is it a must-have item, it costs 2 bear runes. You understand? So Enigma costs only 1, but this costs 2 bear runes, so you need 2 bear runes for Infinity. And bear is also used in other rune words like Chains of Honor and stuff like that. Last Wish, okay, they're not as common, but still bear is used in other rune words, right? The same with Law, but I'm taking the critical ones now. Law is Fortitude, Grief. Bear is Infinity, game-changing. Enigma, game-changing. Ja is used in Enigma, which is game-changing. It's also used in Faith, the bow. And Orm is used in Call to Arms, which is also completely game-changing. Vex is used in Hodo, which is not really game-changing, but anyway. So this is why Bear is more valuable than Ja, even though Ja is a more rare rune and you can combine 2 bears to get a Ja. Never do that, by the way. Never ever do that. And for the love of God, do not combine 2 lows to get a Sur. Don't do that. Because sometimes you can get a Ja rune for 2 lows and an ad or something like that if someone is very, very desperate for a Ja for lows because of their value. So this is the rarity. Then you have the third parameter, which is liquidity, which is very important for you to understand. This will also affect the price. Ists are very liquid. These trade a lot. You will see a lot of games. If you want an Ist rune, it's not going to be difficult for you to trade an Ist rune. So liquidity is basically not to go into economics in terms of like supply and demand, just how long it takes you to make a trade. If you want an Ist rune, you can get this in a couple of minutes. It's not hard. You can trade items for Ist. You can trade lower runes for Ist. This is a very liquid rune, and it's relatively common in terms of drops. It's semi-rare, right? I got 2 Ist rune drops yesterday. I think I've got 4 or 5 Ists totally dropping in Magic Find, so it's not that uncommon. Same with Mal, they drop now and again. So this is liquid. Trades in Bear and Ja is not as liquid because these are rarer, and when someone finds a Bear rune, it's not guaranteed that they want to immediately trade it. So if you want to trade yourself in these runes, it will take hours, maybe days, before you find a good trade. So keep that in mind. So with that said, in short, if you find someone who offers the rune that you want, which is a low probability, say you want a Ja, someone offers a Ja, that's a low probability. And even if he offers a Ja, it's not certain. It's even a lower probability that he asks for something that you have. You understand? So you need to find a seller of Ja, and you need to find a seller who wants to sell it for something that you value. So it's not guaranteed that say that you have Orm and Law. It's not guaranteed that the guy who sells the Ja wants an offer in these runes. Maybe he wants a torch, a perfect torch, or Annihilus or something like that. So keep that in mind, the liquidity. Therefore, you might have to add Ists or something like this, or add an extra price just to pay a so-called in economics liquidity premium. So you will have to pay liquidity premiums when you trade, meaning that if you find the right buyer, you might have to add like Pul, Mal or something like that, just so that you can make the trade, because any time you spend looking for a perfect trade is time you can be magic finding, so there's an alternative cost there. And the fourth one is the value that the item has to you, because some items have intrinsic value. For example, not intrinsic, but the personal value. For example, finding a Tyrell Smythe has a big value because it's a rare item, it feels good. Making an Enigma yourself is more expensive than buying it in terms of runes. But you might not value as much an Enigma that someone else has made, rather than you finding an Archon plate, you finding Ja, you finding Bear, you finding it, putting it together, and it rolls. That might have a bigger value to you. For example, myself, I must say that the Hodo I made has big value to me. The Infinity I made has big value. Treachery, I made it. I found it. Griffins, I found it. Spirit, I made it. Mara 29, I found it. Wartraz, found it. 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 Self-found almost completely. All the runes here are self-found. It's just one bear rune in this and the base that I didn't find. But I found a sur rune, so almost a bear rune. So keep in mind the intrinsic value. These are the 4 parameters of value. And this is roughly the value in terms of runes. And you can explain that by these things. So for example, say that you have a sur rune. You want to sell a sur rune. The price will also depend on the liquidity on the market. Because if there are very few people who need a sur rune, usually because they have another sur rune and they want to combine it to the more expensive bear, if you find a buyer, he might ask you a price that is a little bit expensive, like you have to pay 1 ist more. Then you have to evaluate that situation. Is it worth for you to pay a more expensive price? Or say, no, I don't want to trade, I go to the next one. Because you might not find another game in one day where someone wants to sell a sur. So weigh those alternative costs of paying liquidity premiums because it's difficult to find a trade. But nowadays, most of these runes are really, really misvalued and people are making fraud games. I saw yesterday offer sur need 2 lows and 2 ists. I'm like, in what fucking universe is a sur rune worth 2 lows and 2 ists when if I have 2 lows I can just combine them myself? No, a sur is like low ohm if you're lucky, probably low ist or low guld or something like that. Or maybe face to face sur for a low is also not an unreasonable one. So you see these fraud games. I saw another game. Offer Vex need 2 ohms. These kinds of things. And then I'm wondering, what about new players into the game? New players into the game need these kinds of videos. Maybe for me, this is quite obvious. For people like more experienced, have played Diablo 2 for a long time. There are some content creators who have a similar evaluation. It's obvious. But I think these kinds of values on items are very important videos to make because there are so many fraud games. And by the way, if you're a new player, learn this 80% rule. The 80% rule. You know what the 80% rule is? 80% of the trade games you see in the list are shit. Okay? Just 80% of the games are shit. So you do have to scroll for a while before you find something that is even reasonable in trade. Shaco for ist, reasonable. Need mal, offer 3 pull, that's the garbage game. Yeah, just garbage. I mean, yeah, sure, that's pull, but it's still like, why? Nobody needs pull runes, so no. Offer Monarch need pull as garbage. Monarchs are not worth pull anymore. Offer Alibaba need loom. Yeah, that's also a garbage game because nobody needs Alibabas. Alibabas is so easy to find. Nobody needs loom runes and nobody needs Alibabas. Offer sur need low. Yeah, that's a very good trade. If I had a low rune, I would make that trade. Because, as we said, you can sometimes get sur for low. He had a sur, and sur is not worth anything other than it's half a bear. But he really needs a low rune, and for his fortitude or his grief, so he offers low for that.